The Forgotten SOS That Unleashed Humanity's War God. Part 1. The Deep Space Exploration Vessel. Orion's spear drifted silently through the void. Its massive engines were quiet as it coasted on momentum alone, conserving fuel in this unexplored region of space. Captain Alan Grant stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays. He stared out at the endless stars, each one a possible home to unknown wonders or dangers. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual," said Communications Officer Denise Washington. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. "It's a signal, very old from the look of it." Alan walked over to her station. "How old are we talking about?" "Based on signal degradation, I'd estimate at least 300 years, she said, surprise evident in her voice. "It's using an obsolete encoding protocol. The computer is trying to translate it now." Susan Miller, the ship's second-in-command, joined them. Her short gray hair framed a face that showed both curiosity and concern. 300 years? That can't be right. No human ships were this far out back then. "Who said it was human?" Alan replied. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had encountered several alien species in their expansion into the stars, but none had ventured this far from their home systems. "Signal translation complete," announced the ship's AI. "It appears to be a distress call from a species identifying themselves as Arcadians. The message repeats coordinates and a request for immediate assistance." Alan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Arcadians? I've never heard of them." "I have," said Science Officer Peter Blackwood. The tall, thin man stepped forward, his eyes wide with excitement. "They're supposed to be a myth, an advanced peaceful species that disappeared from galactic records centuries ago. There are references to them in several ancient alien texts, but most scholars consider them legendary." Susan frowned. "Captain, we should report this to Earth Command before proceeding. Our mission parameters don't cover first contact scenarios, especially with a supposedly extinct species." Alan nodded. "Send the report, but I'm not waiting for a response that will take weeks to arrive. Plot a course for those coordinates, Mr. Kim." "Course plotted, sir," responded Navigation Officer Eric Kim after a few moments. "We can be there in 16 hours at standard speed." "Make it 12, Alan ordered. "Something about this doesn't feel right." The Orion's spear changed course, its engines flaring to life as it accelerated toward the source of the ancient plea for help. 12 hours later, the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a dying red giant star. Orbiting the massive star was a derelict space station, its design unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The structure was elegant, with sweeping curves and spires that seemed to defy conventional engineering. "Fascinating," breathed Peter. "The architecture matches descriptions of Arcadian design aesthetics from the myths. The station appears to be in a dormant state rather than abandoned. There are still minimal power readings." Alan studied the scans. "Any life signs?" "None detected, Captain," replied Medical Officer Lisa Rodriguez, "but the station's shielding might be interfering with our sensors." "Prepare a boarding party. I want to know what happened here," Alan decided. "Susan, you have..." "The bridge. I'll lead the team myself." Susan looked like she wanted to object, but nodded professionally. "Be careful, sir." The boarding party consisted of Alan, Peter, Lisa, and Security Chief John Martinez. They crossed to the station in a shuttle, docking with minimal difficulty, despite the ancient technology. As they stepped through the airlock, their helmet lights cut through the darkness of the station's corridors. "The air is breathable," Lisa announced after checking her instruments. "Oxygen levels are being maintained, somehow." They removed their helmets and the team moved deeper into the station. The corridors were wide and tall, suggesting the Arcadians were larger than humans. The walls were covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles. "These aren't just decorative," Peter said, examining the patterns closely. "I think there's some kind of data storage." Suddenly the lights in the corridor activated, startling the team. A soft humming filled the air, and the patterns on the walls began to glow with increasing intensity. "I think the station is waking up," John said, his hand moving to his weapon. Wait, Alan cautioned. Let's not appear threatening. The humming grew louder, and then a section of the wall shifted, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside was what appeared to be a control room. As they entered, a holographic display activated in the center of the room, showing a tall, elegant being, with 4 arms and smooth, pale skin. Greetings, the hologram spoke in a melodious voice. If you are viewing this message, then the Arcadian people are likely no more. I am Curator Alara, last keeper of this outpost. The team watched in amazement as the hologram continued. 312 cycles ago, our civilization was attacked by a species known as the Wreck. They are predators, consumers of worlds and the beings that inhabit them. We were a peaceful species, unprepared for their savagery. The hologram changed to show images of sleek, aggressive ships attacking Arcadian worlds. The Wreck themselves were reptilian in appearance, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to burn with hunger. We sent distress calls to all sectors of space, hoping someone would come to our aid, but none arrived in time. This station contains our final records, our cultural heritage, and most importantly, the coordinates to our scattered outposts where survivors may still exist in stasis. Peter was frantically recording everything while Lisa stood in stunned silence. John remained alert, watching their surroundings. To whoever finds this message, the hologram of Alara continued, beware the Wreck. They will not stop until all intelligent life is consumed. They believe themselves to be the pinnacle of evolution, with the right to feed on all lesser beings. If they discover you have accessed this information, they will come for you as well. Alan felt a chill run down his spine. How would they know we're here? As if in answer to his question, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Alert! Wreck energy signatures detected, announced an automated voice in the same melodious tones as the hologram. 3 vessels approaching. Estimated arrival, 6 minutes. Back to the shuttle, Alan ordered. Denise. He activated his comm. Linkair, prepare for emergency departure and transmit everything we've learned back to Earth Command. Use the quantum entanglement communicator. We can't risk standard transmissions being intercepted. As the team raced back through the corridors, the station around them fully awakened, lights and systems activating as if in panic. Captain, Denise's voice came through the comm. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're like nothing in our database, but they match the Wreck ships from the hologram. The team reached the shuttle just as the station shuddered from an impact. They're firing on the station, Eric reported as the boarding party re-entered the Orion Spear. Get us out of here, maximum speed, Alan ordered, strapping into his command chair. The view screen showed 3 predatory-looking ships, their designs sharp and aggressive, moving to surround them. Incoming transmission, Denise announced. A harsh, reptilian face appeared on the screen. Humans, the Wreck commander hissed, its voice translated by the ship's computer. You have accessed Arcadian knowledge. That knowledge belongs to us. Surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. Resistance would be delicious. Alan felt his crew looking to him, fear and determination in their eyes. The ancient distress call had awakened something terrible, and now humanity was in its sights. Like hell, Alan replied, cutting the transmission. Evasive maneuvers. Get us into hyperspace now. As the Orion Spear fled from the ancient horror they had discovered, Denise confirmed, Transmission to Earth complete, sir. They know everything we've learned here. Alan nodded grimly. Let's just hope they prepare accordingly. I think we just started a war. The forgotten SOS that unleashed humanity's war. God, Part 2 William Carter stood at the window of his office in the United Earth Defense Headquarters. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the floor as the evening sun set over Washington, D.C. He ran a hand through his graying hair as he studied the report from the Orion Spear for the 20th time. The ship had made it back to Earth space a week ago, limping home with damage from their narrow escape from the Wreck. The door to his office slid open and Admiral Frank Johnson entered. The older man's face looked grim. The council has reviewed your proposal, Frank said. They've rejected it. William turned from the window. They can't be serious. Did they even look at the Arcadian data? The wreck will come for us next. It's only a matter of time. They believe our current fleet can handle any threat, Frank replied, not sounding convinced himself. They think your Ares protocol is too extreme a response. William grabbed a tablet from his desk and thrust it toward Frank. Look at these wreck ship specifications from the Arcadian records. They outclass our best vessels in every way, and their ground forces. He shook his head. The Arcadians were more advanced than us, and the wreck wiped them out. Frank sighed heavily. I know, I voted to approve your plan, but I was outnumbered. The Ares protocol was shut down for good reasons, William. You know that better than anyone. William's jaw tightened. The Ares protocol had been his life's work, a super soldier program designed to create the ultimate human warrior. The program had produced exactly one successful subject before ethical concerns shut it down. That subject now lay frozen in suspended animation deep beneath the Nevada desert. Frank, we need Hayes, William said quietly. He's our only chance. If the Vrek attack, the council won't authorize you. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the building. Both men stiffened as emergency lights began to flash. What now? Frank muttered, pressing his earpiece to listen to the incoming reports. His face paled. My God. What is it? William demanded. The colony on New Haven has gone dark. All communications cut off an hour ago. The nearest patrol ship just arrived and reports. Frank swallowed hard. 3 wreck warships in orbit. They've already landed ground forces. William felt cold dread in his stomach. New Haven was home to over 50,000 colonists. How long until our fleet can respond? The nearest battle group is 4 days out, Frank replied. By then, the words hung unspoken between them. By then, it would be too late. 3 hours later, William stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council. The 12 members sat in a semicircle, their faces grave as they viewed the limited footage transmitted from New Haven before communications were lost. As you can see, William concluded his presentation, conventional forces will be insufficient against this threat. The Vrek technology far exceeds our own, but we have one option that might give us a fighting chance. He took a deep breath. The ARES protocol. Counselor Howard frowned. That program was shut down for good reason. The subject was deemed unstable and dangerous. More dangerous than the wreck? William countered. You've seen the footage. They're not just conquering New Haven, they're harvesting the colonists. A horrified murmur ran through the council. William pressed his advantage. Major Samuel Hayes is our best hope. He was the only successful subject of the Ares protocol. His strength, speed, and tactical abilities were enhanced beyond normal human limits. He could lead a special forces team to New Haven while the main fleet is still en route. And what's to stop Hayes from becoming a threat himself? Asked Counselor Garcia. The psychological evaluations were clear. The enhancements caused increased aggression and reduced empathy. Hayes was a volunteer, William reminded them, a decorated soldier who knew the risks. Before the program was shut down, he agreed to cryogenic suspension until he was needed. William looked each council member in the eye. And now we need him. The council debated for another hour before finally taking a vote. It was close, but fear of the Vrek threat won out over fear of what they might unleash. Reanimation of subject Samuel Hayes is authorized, announced the council chairwoman, but he is to be closely monitored at all times. At the first sign of instability, you are ordered to terminate him. Is that understood, Director Carter? William nodded. Perfectly. The Nevada facility was buried deep underground, accessible only by a single elevator that required multiple layers of security clearance. William descended with Dr. Karen Peterson, the daughter of one of the original Ares scientists. She had been briefed on the mission and had agreed to oversee Hayes's reanimation. I've reviewed my father's notes, Karen said as they descended. The cryogenic process should have preserved him perfectly, but there may be psychological effects from such long-term suspension. How long will it take him to be combat ready? William asked. That's the remarkable thing about the Ares protocol, Karen replied. The enhancements include accelerated healing and adaptation. He should be physically ready within hours of waking. Mentally, she shrugged. That's harder to predict. The elevator doors opened to reveal a long white corridor. At the end was a heavy security door marked simply, Ares. Inside was a large chamber dominated by a cryogenic pod in the center. Frost covered the viewing panel, obscuring the occupant inside. Medical equipment surrounded the pod, ready to monitor and assist the reanimation process. Begin the procedure, William ordered. Karen moved to the control panel and entered a series of commands. The pod hummed to life, and the frost began to melt from the viewing panel. As it cleared, William got his first look at Major Samuel Hayes. In over a decade, Hayes was a large man with a soldier's build, made even more impressive by the Ares enhancements. His face was angular and strong, his head shaved. Even in frozen sleep, there was something intimidating about him. Vitals are stabilizing, Karen reported as she monitored the readouts. Brain activity is unusual. Unusual how? William asked, concerned. It's higher than it should be for someone in cryosleep. It's almost as if... She looked at William with surprise. It's almost as if he wasn't fully unconscious. The pod hissed as the seal released. The lid slowly opened, releasing a cloud of cold vapor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Hayes's eyes snapped open. They were an unnatural ice blue, a side effect of the Ares protocol. He sat up in a single fluid motion and fixed his gaze on William. Director Carter, Hayes said, his voice raspy from disuse but strong. You finally decided to wake me. William stared in shock. You remember me? I remember everything, Hayes replied as he swung his legs over the side of the pod. I could hear and sense everything while I was under. My mind kept working. His eyes narrowed. 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days, that's how long you kept me frozen. Karen looked alarmed, but William stepped forward. We need you, Major. Earth is facing a threat unlike anything we've encountered before. Hayes stood up, seemingly unbothered by the cold or his long hibernation. He towered over William, his enhanced frame radiating power and controlled danger. Show me, Hayes said simply. William handed him a tablet containing all the information on the wreck and the situation at New Haven. Hayes absorbed the information with frightening speed, his enhanced mind processing the data much faster than a normal human. When do we leave? Hayes asked after a few minutes. A special operations vessel is being prepared. The Retribution. It will be ready in 12 hours, William replied. Hayes nodded once. I'll be ready in 6. And, Director? His ice-blue eyes locked onto William's. After I deal with these wreck, you and I will have a long conversation about my time in the ice. William felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cryogenic chamber. He realized that in their desperation to face one monster, they might have awakened another. The forgotten SOS that unleashed humanity's war god. Part 3, the military vessel Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tau Ceti system. The ship was smaller than a regular battlecruiser, but packed with advanced weapon systems. On the bridge, Captain Natalie Boyd watched the main screen with concern as New Haven came into view. The once thriving colony planet now had 3 massive wreck warships in orbit around it. Scan for human life signs, she ordered. Scanning, replied the sensor officer. I'm detecting approximately 40,000 human signatures on the surface. That's 10,000 fewer than the colony's reported population. Natalie's face hardened. They were already too late for many of the colonists. She turned to her communications officer. Any response to our hails? Nothing from the colony, Captain. But the wreck ships are scanning us. Where is Major Hayes? Natalie asked. In the armory, preparing his gear, answered her first officer. Natalie had been briefed about Hayes and the Ares protocol before the mission. She wasn't sure what to make of the super soldier, but right now, the colonists needed every advantage they could get. In the ship's armory, Samuel Hayes methodically checked his weapons. His movements were precise and efficient. The standard combat armor had been modified to fit his enhanced frame, but he'd removed several pieces to increase his mobility. He didn't need as much protection as regular soldiers. Dr. Karen Peterson watched him from the doorway. "You should reconsider the full armor package," she said. "The wreck weapons are extremely powerful." Hayes looked up at her, his ice blue eyes intense. "Speed and stealth will keep me alive better than armor." He loaded a high-powered rifle and slung it over his back. "Besides, the Ares protocol improved my bone density and skin resilience. I can take hits that would kill normal soldiers." Karen frowned. "Your enhancements aren't magic, Major. You're still human." A small, cold smile touched Hayes' lips. "Am I?" Before Karen could respond, Captain Boyd's voice came over the intercom. "Major Hayes to the bridge. We have a situation." When Hayes arrived on the bridge, the main screen showed one of the wreck ships breaking orbit and heading toward the Retribution. "They've spotted us," Natalie said. "We're outgunned 3-1. Standard protocol would be to retreat and wait for reinforcements." Hayes studied the tactical display. "The other ships are maintaining position over the main colony. They're protecting something important." He pointed to a section of the display. "I need to get down there." "How?" Natalie asked. "They'll detect any shuttle launch." "I don't need a shuttle," Hayes replied. "I need a drop pod and a distraction." 20 minutes later, Hayes sat inside a stealth drop pod in the launch bay. The small craft was barely larger than a coffin, designed to deliver Special Forces soldiers to a planet's surface with minimal detection risk. "This is insane," Karen said over the comm, as she monitored his vital signs from the medical bay. "The impact forces alone could kill you. Trust the enhancements, Doctor," Hayes replied calmly as he strapped himself in. "That's what they were designed for." Captain Boyd's voice cut in. "We're engaging the approaching wreck ship in 30 seconds. Be ready for launch." Hayes closed his eyes briefly. Images flashed through his mind, memories of battles fought long, ego strategies and combat maneuvers he had mentally rehearsed thousands of times during his years in cryosleep. When he opened his eyes again, they were focused and cold. "Launch when ready," he said. The Retribution suddenly rolled and fired, all forward batteries at the approaching wreck ship. As the enemy vessel returned fire, the drop pod silently launched from the underside of the human ship, its stealth systems masking it from sensors. The pod streaked toward New Haven, entering the atmosphere on the opposite side from the space battle. Hayes felt the G-forces increase as the pod descended, but his enhanced body handled the stress better than any normal human could. The pod's heat shield glowed red-hot as it cut through the atmosphere. With a bone-jarring impact, the pod crashed into a forested area 5 miles from the main colony. The impact would have killed or severely injured a regular soldier. But Hayes unbuckled himself and kicked open the hatch, emerging with only minor bruises. He quickly surveyed his surroundings, enhanced senses taking in every detail. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds or wildlife. Hayes activated his tactical display and began moving toward the colony, staying in the shadows. As he neared the edge of the forest, he got his first ground-level view of the wreck. They were tall, reptilian creatures with powerful builds. Their faces had a predatory design, with forward-facing eyes and jaws that looked capable of tearing through armor. They moved with the confidence of apex predators. Hayes counted at least 30 wreck soldiers patrolling the colony perimeter. Beyond them, he could see humans being herded like cattle toward large structures that hadn't been part of the original colony design, processing centers of some kind. A cold rage filled Hayes as he watched a wreck soldier casually strike down an elderly colonist who couldn't keep up with the others. The aliens' complete disregard for human life triggered something primal in Hayes' enhanced mind. He checked his weapons one last time and switched his comm to a secure channel. "This is Hayes. I've reached the colony perimeter. Heavy wreck presence. They're processing colonists for some purpose. Request permission to engage." Captain Boyd's voice came back, distorted by interference. "Negative. Main fleet is still 3 days out. Observe only until..." Hayes switched off the comm. He knew what needed to be done. The wreck had to learn that humans weren't easy prey. He moved silently around the perimeter, placing small explosive charges at key points. When he was satisfied with the setup, he took position on a small rise that gave him a clear line of sight to the main patrol route. Hayes took a deep breath, centered himself, and squeezed the trigger of his rifle. The first wreck dropped without a sound. Before the others could react, Hayes had taken down 3 more. The aliens scattered, looking for cover, but they were used to terrified prey, not calculating predators. Hayes detonated the first explosive, charge, creating chaos on the far side of the perimeter. As the wreck forces divided to respond to multiple threats, he moved in, a shadow among shadows. What followed was unlike anything in human military history. Hayes moved through the wreck, forces like a ghost striking with deadly precision. His enhanced speed made him nearly invisible to the aliens, and his strength allowed him to engage them in close combat despite their larger size. One wreck commander caught a glimpse of Hayes as he eliminated an entire patrol. The alien's eyes widened in what might have been the first fear its species had felt in centuries of hunting. Within an hour, Hayes had cleared the perimeter defenses and freed the first group of colonists. Among them was a colonial security officer named Ben Davis. "Who are you?" Ben asked, staring at Hayes with a mixture of awe and fear. "Reinforcements," Hayes replied simply. He handed Ben a weapon taken from a fallen wreck. "Can you handle this?" Ben nodded, his hands steady despite everything he'd been through. "I was military before joining colonial security. What's the plan?" "Free as many colonists as possible," Hayes said. "Arm those who can fight. Then we take back the colony center." "There are thousands of wreck in the main compound," Ben warned, "and they have some kind of processing ship landed in the central plaza. They're taking people aboard." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Show me." From a concealed position on top of a storage building, Hayes and Ben watched as colonists were marched up a ramp into a wreck vessel. The ship was smaller than their warships, clearly designed for a specific purpose. "What are they doing to them?" Ben whispered. Hayes adjusted his tactical visor to zoom in on the ship's interior. What he saw made even his enhanced mind recoil. The colonists were being placed in chambers where their genetic material and life essence were being extracted and stored. "They're not just conquerors," Hayes said, his voice flat. "They're harvesters. The forgotten SOS that unleashed humanity's war god." Part fortnight fell over the New Haven colony. Hayes and Ben had gathered a small resistance force of 50 colonists with military experience. They hid in an abandoned maintenance tunnel beneath the colony's main power plant. "The processing ship has taken at least 300 colonists today," Ben reported, pointing to a rough map they had drawn. "They rotate guards every 6 hours. The next rotation happens in 30 minutes. Hayes studied the map. His enhanced mind calculated angles, distances, and probabilities faster than any computer. "We don't have enough people or firepower for a direct assault," he said, "but we don't need one." He looked at the men and women around him. They were tired and scared, but determination burned in their eyes. "I'm going in alone," Hayes told them. "Your job is to secure and protect the colonists I free." "That's suicide," one of the colonists objected. "There are hundreds of wreck in there." Hayes checked his weapons with mechanical precision. "Numbers don't matter. They've never faced anything like me." Ben saw something in Hayes's eyes that made him step back. "What exactly are you?" "Something that should have stayed frozen," Hayes replied quietly. "But the wreck forced our hand." He turned to address the group. "Be ready to move on my signal. Things are about to get very loud." 20 minutes later, Hayes approached the wreck processing center. He moved like a shadow, his enhanced muscles allowing him to scale walls and leap between buildings that would be impossible for normal humans. From his vantage point on a water tower, he observed the wreck changing their guard rotation. The aliens were efficient and organized. Hayes noted their patrol routes and communication patterns. They were overconfident, not expecting resistance after their initial takeover of the colony. That would be their mistake. Hayes took a small device from his belt, a sonic disruptor, designed to affect the wreck's sensitive hearing. He activated it and threw it toward the far side of the compound. The effect was immediate. The nearest wreck guards clutched at their heads in pain, their organized formation breaking down into chaos. Hayes dropped from the water tower directly onto two guards, neutralizing them silently before they could raise an alarm. He moved through the distracted wreck like a force of nature. His enhanced strength allowed him to snap their armor with bare hands. His speed made him almost invisible to their eyes. For the first time in centuries, the apex predators of the galaxy knew what it felt like to be hunted. Inside the main building, Hayes found rows of holding cells filled with colonists, waiting to be processed. He smashed the control panel and all the cell doors slid open. "Head for the maintenance tunnels," he told the stunned prisoners. "There are people waiting to help you. Move quickly and stay together." A terrified woman grabbed his arm. "My daughter was taken to the ship earlier today. Please." Hayes nodded once. "I'm going there next." As the freed colonists fled, Hayes continued deeper into the facility. He encountered heavier resistance, but the Vrek were not prepared for close-quarter combat, with someone who could match their strength and exceed their speed. By the time he reached the landing pad where the processing ship was docked, alarms were blaring throughout the compound. Hayes could see Vrek officers shouting orders, trying to regain control of the situation. The ramp to the ship was heavily guarded. Hayes knew a direct approach would be suicide, even for him. He circled around to the back of the landing pad, where a maintenance access panel provided entry to the underside of the ship. Using his enhanced strength, Hayes pried open the panel and climbed inside. The ship's interior was hot and humid, designed for the Vrek's reptilian biology. He moved through narrow maintenance ducts until he reached the processing center. What he saw there changed something fundamental in Hayes. Humans were suspended, in clear tubes, their life essence being slowly drained into collection tanks. The process kept them alive, but in obvious agony. Among them were children, their small bodies twisted in pain. For the first time since his awakening, Hayes felt something break through his cold, tactical mindset. Pure rage flooded his system. The Ares protocol had enhanced his emotional responses, along with his physical abilities, and now that enhancement turned him into something terrible to behold. Hayes no longer moved with calculated precision. He became a whirlwind of destruction. He tore through the ship's interior, destroying equipment, and killing any Vrek in his path with savage efficiency. The aliens tried to stop him, but he was beyond stopping now. He reached the central control room and found the ship's commander, a larger Vrek with elaborate armor and facial markings. The commander hissed something in its native language that Hayes's translator picked up as, "What manner of prey fights back with such fury?" "We're not prey," Hayes growled as he advanced on the commander. "We're the predators you should have feared." The fight was brutal but brief, despite the commander's size and skill. It was no match for Hayes's enhanced abilities combined with his cold rage. When it was over, Hayes accessed the ship's control systems and released all the captives from their processing tubes. As the weakened colonists stumbled out of their tubes, Hayes found the little girl whose mother he had met earlier. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was barely conscious, her small body drained of energy by the wreck machines. Hayes gently picked her up. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his ice-blue eyes. "You're safe now," he told her, softly. "I'm taking you to your mother." The child looked up at him with tired eyes. "Are you a soldier?" Hayes hesitated. "Something like that." As he carried the child through the ship, helping other freed colonists along the way, he reached the command deck. From there, he could see the colony spread out below. The resistance fighters had moved in, helping evacuate the freed prisoners. But in the distance, he could see more Vrek forces gathering for a counterattack. Hayes activated his comm unit. "Captain Boyd, do you read me?" "Hayes," Natalie's voice came through with relief. "We thought you were dead. What's your status?" "I've secured the processing ship and freed the captives," he reported. "But we have more Vrek forces inbound. We need extraction." "We're engaged with 2 Vrek warships," Boyd replied. "We can't break free for at least 3 hours. Hayes looked at the frightened colonists around him. "They wouldn't survive 3 more hours." "Then I need a new plan." He turned to the ship's control console. His enhanced mind quickly deciphered the alien technology. A plan formed in his mind. Desperate and dangerous, but their only hope. Everyone needs to get off this ship now, he ordered the colonists. I'm taking it up. You can fly this thing? One of the colonists asked in disbelief. We're about to find out, Hayes replied as he strapped himself into the commander's chair. The processing ship wasn't designed for combat, but it was still a powerful vessel. And in the hands of humanity's most dangerous soldier, it might just be enough to buy them the time they needed. As the last colonists evacuated, Hayes powered up the ship's engines. The wreck reinforcements were less than a mile away now. The predators were about to learn a painful lesson about cornering human prey. The little girl was the last to leave the ship. She paused at the exit ramp and looked back at Hayes. Will you come back? She asked. Hayes's face softened just slightly. Count on it, he promised. But as the ramp closed and the ship began to rise, he wasn't sure if that was a promise he could keep. The Forgotten SOS That Unleashed Humanity's War God, Part 5. The wreck processing ship rose awkwardly into the night sky of New Haven. Hayes had quickly learned the basic controls, but the ship wasn't designed for combat or maneuverability. Still, it was all he had to work with. On the ground below, the remaining colonists watched in awe as the alien vessel turned toward the advancing wreck forces. Ben organized the evacuation, leading people toward the emergency bunkers at the colonies. The little girl Hayes had rescued stood beside her mother, her eyes following the ship's path across the sky. Will the soldier man be okay? She asked. Her mother squeezed her hand. I hope so, honey, I hope so. In orbit above New Haven, the Retribution continued its desperate battle against 2 wreck warships. Captain Boyd's face was grim as she assessed the damage reports. The ship's shields were failing and they were running out of options. Captain, called the sensor officer. I'm detecting unusual movement from the surface. It appears to be one of the wreck ships. Natalie leaned forward. Put it on screen. The main display showed the processing ship rising unsteadily from the colony. It's Hayes, she realized. He's hijacked their ship. How is that possible? Her first officer asked in disbelief. It's Hayes, she repeated, as if that explained everything. And in a way it did. Inside the wreck vessel, Hayes piloted toward the advancing ground forces. The ship's sensors showed at least 500 wreck soldiers converging on the colony center. They had brought heavy weapons and combat vehicles, clearly intending to overwhelm any resistance. Hayes examined the ship's systems. It wasn't armed with conventional weapons. It wasn't designed for war. But the processing equipment used powerful energy fields to extract life essence from living beings. With a few adjustments, those fields could be projected outward. As the ship passed over the wreck forces, Hayes activated the modified system. A wave of energy washed over the advancing aliens. It wasn't lethal, but it disrupted their nervous systems, causing pain and confusion. The orderly advance collapsed into chaos. Hayes allowed himself a small, grim smile. The hunters were learning what it felt like to be helpless prey. But he knew the effect was temporary. He needed a more permanent solution. He pushed the ship higher, heading toward orbit where the real battle was taking place. If the Retribution fell, there would be no escape for the colonists. Major Hayes to Retribution, he called over the comm. I'm coming to assist. With what? Captain Boyd responded. That ship has no weapons. It has a power core, Hayes replied coldly, and I know how to make it overload. There was a long silence before Boyd understood what he was suggesting. Hayes, that's suicide. Not necessarily, this ship has escape pods. He didn't mention that using them would require perfect timing and more than a little luck. In orbit, the 2 wreck warships detected the approaching processing vessel. Initially, confused by its presence, they quickly realized it was under human control. One of the warships broke off its attack on the Retribution to intercept the smaller vessel. Good, Hayes muttered. Follow the bait. He pushed the hijacked ship to its limits, leading the wreck warship away from the Retribution. Meanwhile, his hands worked furiously at the control panel, setting up the power core overload sequence. The warship fired, landing a direct hit on the processing vessel. The ship shuddered violently, and warning alarms blared throughout the cockpit. Hayes ignored them, focused entirely on his task. "Retribution. Be ready to jump to hyperspace on my mark," he ordered. "The blast radius will be significant." "Captain." Boyd hesitated only briefly. "Understood, Major. Godspeed." The wreck warship closed in for another attack. It was now positioned perfectly between the processing ship and the second warship that was still engaging the Retribution. Hayes finished the overload sequence and locked it in. The ship's computer displayed a countdown, 20 seconds until detonation. He ran for the nearest escape pod, his enhanced body moving with impossible speed. With 5 seconds remaining, Hayes launched the escape pod away from the ship. The tiny craft tumbled through space, putting distance between itself and the doomed vessel. The processing ship exploded with far more force than the wreck had anticipated. The warship that had been pursuing Hayes was instantly destroyed. The Yaoer, second warship, though further away, suffered severe damage from the blast wave. "Now!" Hayes shouted into his communicator. "Retribution, jump now." The human ship vanished into hyperspace just as the second wave of the explosion reached its position. The damaged wreck warship, unable to escape in time, broke apart under the strain. Hayes's escape pod was thrown violently by the explosion. Systems failed and emergency oxygen activated. As consciousness began to fade, Hayes saw through the pod's small viewport that the New Haven sky was clear of wrecked ships. He had given the colonists their chance. It was enough. 3 days later, the main Earth Defense Fleet arrived at New Haven. They found the colony badly damaged but standing. Most of the colonists had survived, protected in the emergency bunkers. The wreck ground forces had retreated after their ships were destroyed, boarding their remaining vessels and fleeing the system. Search teams found Hayes's escape pod drifting at the edge of the system. Against all odds, the super soldier was alive, though barely. His enhanced physiology had kept him going long after a normal human would have died. On the medical ship, Dr. Karen Peterson worked tirelessly to save him. "His body is healing itself," she reported to William Carter, who had arrived with the fleet. "But the damage was extensive. We don't know if he'll ever be the same." William looked down at Hayes's still form. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. 1 week later, as Hayes began to recover, a strange ship entered the New Haven system. It wasn't wreck or human. The Earth fleet prepared for another battle, but the vessel transmitted a peaceful greeting in multiple languages. When representatives from the ship came aboard the fleet's command vessel, everyone stared in shock. The visitors were tall, elegant beings with 4 arms and smooth, pale skin, Arcadians identical to the holographic image Hayes had seen from the ancient distress signal. "We received a transmission," explained their leader, a female named Loris. "After centuries of hiding, we detected the signal from one of our old outposts. When we investigated, we found evidence of humans fighting the wreck. We thought we were the last, but there are more of us in hidden enclaves throughout the galaxy." William Carter couldn't hide his amazement. "You survived all this time?" "In small numbers, yes," Loris confirmed. "We've been monitoring the wreck from the shadows, gathering information. But we never dared to fight back. We never had a weapon that could match them." She looked at Hayes, who had insisted on attending despite his injuries. "Until now." Hayes met her gaze steadily. "I'm not a weapon." "No," she agreed. "You're something far more dangerous to them. You're the beginning of their end." In the days that followed, humanity and the remaining Arcadians formed an alliance. The Arcadians shared their advanced technology, while humans provided their determination and military expertise. Together, they would stand against the wreck threat. As for Hayes, he was changed by his experience on New Haven. The cold, tactical mind created by the Ares Protocol had been touched by something more human, by the little girl he had saved, by the colonists who had fought alongside him, by his own sacrifice. One evening, as he stood watching the sunset on New Haven, the little girl found him. She held out a small, handmade doll that resembled him in his combat gear. "I made this for you," she said. Mom says you're our protector now. Hayes knelt down to accept the gift. For the first time since his awakening, he smiled. A genuine smile that reached his ice-blue eyes. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Hope," she replied. Hayes nodded. It seemed fitting. A forgotten call for help had unleashed humanity's war god. But perhaps it had also awakened something else, something that even the Ares Protocol's creators hadn't anticipated, something more powerful than rage or vengeance. Hope,